Blasphemous is probably one of my all-time favorite Metroidvanias, from the gorgeous pixel art to the simple but fun combat. Something that really caught my attention though is the dark and disturbing world along with the twisted story of it all. I was convinced that Blasphemous was one of, if not the darkest game that I had ever played. I even made a short on it. And then I saw the comments. I made a mistake of listening to them. I was told to play a game that was more screwed up than anything else that I have ever seen, and that game was none other than Fear and Hunger. Hi, I'm Pindar, and I play video games. Here's the disclaimer. Yeah, there's no joke here. This game is just really screwed up, and while I'll try to avoid talking about certain topics, it just will not be possible for me to completely avoid mentioning or showing some of these things due to how the game is. Now, this is a review, so I'll be going over Fear and Hunger's gameplay mechanics along with the other things such as the story and world, and whether or not I thought that they were good, bad, or maybe regret buying this game. And of course, there'll be a rating of what I thought overall at the end if you're interested. And with that, let's go ahead and lunge ourselves into the depths of the dungeon of Fear and Hunger. This will be a short segment, but Fear and Hunger starts off by asking you to pick a starting character, which I'm about to butcher all the names to. Kahara, the mercenary, Darce, the knight, Enki, I think that's how you say it, the priest, and Ragnvaldr, the outlander. Each one has a unique background and set of skills, and if you watch the intro, you get to choose what kind of path they chose throughout their lives, which will affect what skills you start with, such as Kahara being a burglar, which lets you start off with lockpicking, an incredible skill which allows you to avoid using keys for locked doors. Now, while this in itself isn't super exciting, I like having options. But what I really enjoy is the fact that no matter who you choose, you'll end up running into the other three somewhere down the line, allowing you to learn a little bit more about their character that you may have not discovered otherwise. Such as Ragnvaldr. You'll find him in the yard, and if you talk to him, he'll actually give you a passionate explanation about his homeland. You can also eventually recruit all these people if you so choose to, but the game doesn't exactly make it very easy. Something else that I really like about this game, though, is the fact that everybody has a different reason as to why they came to the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger. And when they meet up in the dungeon, they don't exactly explain why properly to one another. Now, something really cool is the fact that Darce is there to save her captain, Lagarde, because she's in love with him. But Ragnvaldr is there to kill him because Lagarde's group, the Knights of the Midnight Sun, actually killed his wife and child. I think it's really interesting because Darce and Ragnvaldr can be in the same exact party but have no idea of one another's motives until the end. Yeah, this game's hard, okay? This game is difficult. I played on the easiest difficulty, and it still took me 3 different runs and several hours of backtracking after dying to some random encounter just to finally get one ending. Now, Fear and Hunger was made in RPG Maker, so I'm gonna go ahead and give you a second to figure out what kind of game it is. Congrats, you figured out it's an RPG. Meaning that the most basic elements that are in a normal RPG are also inside of Fear and Hunger. A basic attack, skills/abilities, guarding, using items, you know, the works. Now, there's 2 defining differences that give a little bit of life to the game, and one is instead of mana or something similar, it's your mind. The dungeon is dark, and it's terrifying, and it's causing your sanity to just slowly drain. But sanity is also how you use magic or certain skills, which, when you lose half of your sanity, you learn how to... which ends the game instantly if you use that. And when you end up hitting 0, you get the fear of everything. As the game suggests, fear is a huge element in the game, and that's because every single character upon starting gets a random fear, which makes your party member less likely to dodge an enemy if they're afraid of it, and they'll take more damage from such. So as you can guess, having a fear of literally everything can be pretty bad. But don't worry, you can regain your mind just by getting absolutely plastered. I think it's an interesting mechanic, and it really reminds me of Darkest Dungeon's Stress, although unlike Darkest Dungeon Stress, which is a constant problem, since I got super unlucky and I didn't get any magic while playing, it wasn't really a huge issue. The game provides a lot of ways to regain your mind, and it doesn't really go down that slowly as long as you're using torches consistently. Just, you know, puff puff, smoke a little tobacco, and boom, my nerves are all gone. And the other defining mechanic is instead of being like, haha, Pokemon style, where you hit the enemy till no, that's not going to work. This is Dead Space, Starvation Edition. You get to target the specific limbs of each enemy, and you know, if they don't have arms, they can't use their weapons. Shatter their legs, not dodging that much anymore. Now, the absolute best aspect of this is hitting the head, because surprise, if you cut off the head of most creatures, they just instantly die. You win! Ta-da! Now, this isn't the easiest task if their kneecaps remain unshattered, but if you're lucky, you can just instantly end a fight in some occasions just by attacking the head. However, this does not just apply to enemies. This applies to you and your party as well. That's right, if an enemy cuts off your arm, you can't use a shield or any weapon that takes 2 hands. You lose both arms? No more weapons! It's the same idea with legs. If you're missing one leg, I don't know, just peg leg it, whatever, it's not that bad. But if you're missing both legs, crawl. If you lose all of your limbs, the game says you just can't do anything and gives you the 2 fantastic suggestions of either holding on or to just quit breathing. This leads into ailments, because I don't think I've ever said in my life, man, I sure do love dying to tetanus and Oregon Trail. I wish more games did that, because Fear and Hunger does that. That's right, you happen to accidentally step on a rusty nail right as you enter the dungeon while your leg is infected, and you get 3 options. Use herbs or the like to clean the infection. Use a bone saw and cut that sucker off, which, as I mentioned earlier, could be an issue if you happen to only have 1 leg left. Or the third option, and my personal favorite, die. And it's not just a threat environmentally either. Enemies can also cause infected wounds, or make you bleed, or poison you, or give you worms. I don't know about the elements, I'm gonna be real. On one hand, I understand it's part of the game's charm of being difficult, and it definitely caused stress when I saw that I was going to have to pick between sacrificing my arm, or just hoping to God I found a disinfectant before I died. Like, don't get me wrong, I love games like this. I love games that are difficult for the sake of being difficult. Darkest Dungeon is probably one of my favorite series of all time. I enjoy the Souls games, and if you happen to remember Welcome to the Game 2, a game which is often referred to as a rage game to the point that the achievement just for beating it is called the 1%, I am a part of the 1%. But that doesn't mean it wasn't annoying when I did end up dying due to neglecting a wound, either willingly or not, and having to replay the last 30 minutes of gameplay, which brings me to my next subject. This game is straight up a different breed. The sheer horror I had doing literally anything in this game for the longest period of time was in itself an experience. As I just mentioned, like, I don't know, a couple seconds ago, dying was annoying, and this was due to the fact that save points are very far away from one another, meaning death can set you back as little as, like, 5 minutes, and possibly upwards of an hour, depending on how slow you're going. Something I adore in video games is exploring, and in a game like Fear and Hunger, where it doesn't really hold your hand and kind of leaves you to dodge oncoming traffic, on top of its rather large map, it seems perfect for what I would like, but the lack of saving in the game, it made me scared. Combat made me worried since I had to question if that small little encounter was about to ruin the past half an hour of progress I had just made. Fear and Hunger truly does a fantastic job at generating curiosity and yet at the same time making you afraid of it. I never knew if I was about to get rewarded for attempting something or ending up in a toilet full of blood and excrement with no way out and I just have to restart. But something I really have to give is genuine props being able to build stress and fear inside of a 2D RPG of all things. There's not a lot of games I can say that are able to manage those feelings. However, I can say, you're not alone in that feeling of subscribing since you made it this far. So why not go ahead and do it? It helps support the channel, and it's free. Going off of the last 2 segments of combat and the fear of dying, both of these combine into probably one of the scariest but also most annoying creatures, and that is Mauler. He's an optional boss that just happens to wander around the dungeons, and also just happens to be one of the hardest enemies inside of the entire dungeon. You'll know if he enters the room that you're currently in, because the game actively tells you. Now, luckily, if Mauler does enter the room and you happen to run into him, he's actually pretty slow, giving you a good chance of just outrunning him. My problem with this, though, is that he can enter a room from seemingly any entrance, meaning if he happens to come from a way that actively is blocking where you want to or need to go, well, you either have to slowly lead him away and get around him, or just, I don't know, like, pray? And that's because of his fight. Dear God, his fight. Mauler only has 3 attacks. The problem is that each one of these attacks is completely devastating. He has Maul, which does heavy damage and also usually just shatters one of your bones, which broken bones, by the way, decreases your party members' maximum health seemingly permanently, so you know, that, not good. His second ability is Flock of Crows, which does less damage than that of Maul, but it has a very high chance to cause blindness, which I remember how I said how terrible losing limbs were? A surprise. Losing something as important as eyesight is awful. Not only is it permanent, but it also makes you miss every single hit, at least my guy did when I got it, and also it makes your screen black. Yeah, so even if you get out of it, you can't see. The game's practically unplayable, and you just have to reload if this happens, honestly. And finally, his third ability, Peck is... I don't like Peck. Peck targets a party member's head, which instantly kills them. If you get unlucky, he can just wipe your entire party in like a turn or two. Now this makes me dislike Crow Mauler due to the fact that there isn't a proper way to face him head on without suffering massive damage or even death of party members. Your only real option is to either avoid him for a huge chunk of the game, and even if you do have plenty of healing, good luck, powerful spells, and weapons, he still just has a chance to instantly kill somebody. Crow Mauler is an incredibly cool character, and I love his design, and I understand that he's being used to prevent the player from just sitting around and doing nothing in the same room for an extended period of time, but despite this, I just can't find him to be anything more than a massive annoyance. Which brings me to a mild annoyance, the RNG of the game, and more specifically, the coin flip mechanic. I get it. It's an RPG. There's going to be RNG. But man, I don't want to have to look at my bad luck directly in the face. See, throughout the game, you get plenty of options to search objects for various things, such as for armor, weapons, items from chests, and plenty more. This is left up to a coin flip. You pick heads or tails, and if you're right, yay, congrats, you get an item. If not, then boo womp, just, I don't know, cry about it. And I know that doesn't sound too bad, but what if I were to say that a large chunk of the beds in the game, which work as the main save mechanic if you don't want to use incredibly rare items, often require you to use a coin flip in order to even save. There's only about 1 or 2 beds in the game that are just safe and allow you to save, but after that, they're no longer safe and you just have to test your luck. If you happen to win the coin flip, then congrats, you get to save, no issues at all. But if you're wrong, then not only do you not get to save, but you also get jumped. And no, you can't just try again right after the fight because your adrenaline is preventing you from sleeping. There's also some enemies that have similar mechanic and where you have to flip a coin in order to avoid a heavy hit, and while yes, there are lucky coins which allow you to flip 2 coins at once, and as long as one of them wins, you're good. If you're like me and just have incredibly bad luck, it doesn't matter. Along with the fact that lucky coins can only be used once each, so if you have 5 and then you use all of them, then like that's it, you don't get any more double flips. I think it's an interesting mechanic and it's kind of cool, but I hate it. My life being left up to a literal coin flip does not sit right with me because there's just no strategy around it and it's just truly all luck. If there's one thing I love in games, it is when the creator or creators understand that we, the players, are not complete morons. And this is most clear in subtle world building. We don't need the story to be shoved down our throats or to be directly told absolutely everything. And I think that Fear and Hunger does a really good job at giving some direct story and world building along with giving subtle hints of the world and the terrifying dungeon that you've sadly found yourself in. There are plenty of books throughout the dungeon that discuss the different gods of the lands, and the more you find, the more and more certain things just start to kind of click, especially the characters. I love the fact that if you don't play every single character, if you meet them, you get a good understanding of how the character is, and some even give you more backstory through just casual conversation. I also think that the fact that depending on your playthrough and your choices, that it is an if and not when you meet them, giving plenty of replayability if that matters to you. Which brings me to Mahabre, the city of the gods. This place is so incredibly cool, and when I did my first playthrough, I completely missed it, and that is a tragedy. An ancient city full of old magic seeping power through every crack. It reminds me of like Nokron from Elden Ring, honestly, and that place is sick. See, there was a book that I found really early into my first playthrough of the game, and it talked about the myth of Mahabre, and then just later on, finding the spot itself, it was magical. From seeing the creepy creatures that wander the ancient city, to meeting the new gods that took it from the old ones. On top of the fact that the game literally puts in the first room of the dungeon a statue of some of the new gods, and then, you know, guess who's in Mahabre? There's just so much story here and fights in this lost land, and it makes sense why a good chunk of the game's endings reside here as well. I personally loved the Tower of Endless because I thought it really builds more of a background and lore for each of the characters in an interactive way, like just absolute cinema. It felt like I had been rewarded for all the efforts to get here, and the fact that it was disguised as a simple bed too, just a safe save spot, gorgeous. I really wish I could talk way more about the story, but I'm going to be honest, I don't fully know or understand a lot of it, and there's definitely better videos with way more knowledgeable people out there that explain it so much better. In fact, there's tons of stuff that I didn't even remotely get to mention because there's just so much to this game, and while that may be an issue for me in the sense of making this video, it's not an issue for the game whatsoever. There's so many characters and locations, and they're all unique and interesting, and there'd be no way for me to show off all of them unless we wanted to be here all day. So maybe just give the game a try? Congrats, you made it to the end with me, and so my overall rating for Fear and Hunger is... I'd say a solid 8 out of 10. I can certainly see why this game would turn people away from playing it, but I am just not one of those people. This kind of game is right up my alley when it comes down to what I like story-wise. The art style really fits with the game's grim tone and overall setting rather well, and I just personally like RPGs, and while the combat for this one is certainly daunting at times, it was still really enjoyable. Obviously there were bumps and issues, and a bug here to there, but those moments were more outlier situations than anything. Like if you had noticed that there was a good handful of things blurred maybe, and that was because I was advised to download a censorship mod before playing, and I'm glad I did, because otherwise I probably wouldn't be making this video. But in the end, the amount of things that I enjoyed about the game just outweighed the things that I disliked. So yeah, that was Fear and Hunger. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you again in the future.